It's your host, Gabe Morales. The New Mexico Department of Corrections is headquartered in unincorporated Santa Fe County. Currently, Alicia Tafoyas Lucero is the New Mexico Secretary of Corrections. The department is comprised of more than 2,500 full-time employees, and the inmate population counts as of January 26, 2026 are 5,616 inmates, confined in custody with an additional 14,909 offenders on probation and parole. I'll try not to repeat too much about New Mexico street and prison gangs that were covered in my two previous videos. But just as a refresher, the original Santa Fe Pen was built in 1885. It was replaced by the old Maine prison facility in 1956. And as I discussed in those videos, in February of 1980, one of the most violent prison riots in correctional history happened at the old Maine prison. During the horrific incident, approximately 33 inmates were killed and 12 guards were held hostage and physically and mentally abused by the prisoners. Inmates were able to take over the control center, raided administrative offices, and set many documents on fire. They also ransacked the prison's pharmacy and took numerous drugs, which may account for some of the psychotic acts they carried out during the riot. Cell Block 4 was the scene of some of the most violent acts where inmates were brutalized and blood was everywhere. Roaming gangs of inmates participated in death squads, whereby they attacked, burned, even using a blowtorch on one inmate's head until it exploded, and killed many other inmates so viciously their stabs made marks into the concrete, walls, and floors. The old Maine facility closed in 1998 and is now used for tours and for film sets. A new facility, referred to as the New Pen, North, South, and MRU, went operational starting from 1983 to 1985 and currently houses 790 inmates. Other facilities include the Central New Mexico Correctional Facility, located in Las Lunas, that was established in 1980 and stands as New Mexico's largest state prison, accommodating well over 1,000 inmates. The facility also features a Level 1 farm that spans more than 1,000 acres. The Guadalupe County Correctional Facility is in Santa Rosa. This facility was built in 1997 and is a Level 3 facility that also houses male parole violators. The Northeast New Mexico Correctional Facility is a Level 2 and Level 3 facility that was built in 2007. It is located in Clayton, New Mexico, approximately 4 miles southeast of the city. Roswell Correctional Center is located in the small town of Hagerman, just outside of Roswell, and it opened in 1978 and currently houses Level 1 and Level 2 inmates. The Southern New Mexico Correctional Facility is located near Las Cruces in Doña Ana County. It houses Level 2, 3, and 4 offenders and includes a restrictive housing unit. The facility was built in the early 1980s and was operational in 1983. The Level 2 facility portion of the prison was established in 1996. The Springer Correctional Center was formerly the New Mexico Boys School until the Children, Youth, and Family Department closed the facility in 2005. Most of the current facility was built in the mid-1960s and designed as an open campus. The Springer Correctional Center opened underneath the New Mexico Department of Corrections in 2007 and was transitioned to a women's facility in 2016. The Western New Mexico Correctional Facility is located in Grants. Like many other facilities, it offers education programs and rehabilitation opportunities. It is comprised of two separate facilities. The women's side, which is the reception and diagnostic center for all female offenders, and it also houses Level 3 and Level 4 general population female offenders. The men's side was transitioned from a private to public operation in November of 2021 and currently houses medium security inmates. I found one source that stated only 4 were executed during the Spanish colonial era from 1598 to 1821. But another source talks about a uprising at the Pueblo Jemez, New Mexico location, whereby local Indians participated in an uprising against Spanish colonial rule, and states that it was the precursor to the Greater Pueblo Revolt of 1680. During this conflict, the Jemez people reportedly killed a Spaniard named Diego Martinez Naranjo, and Governor Don Fernando de Aguayo then ordered the execution of 29 Jemez Indians by hanging, charging them as traitors and being Confederates with Apache Indians, who also resisted the Spanish. None during the Mexican era, 51 during the territorial era, and 20 by the U.S. military during the Taos Rebellion of 1847. This was a revolt by Hispano and Pueblo allies against the United States occupation of present-day New Mexico during the Mexican-American War. Provincial Governor Charles Bent and several other Americans were killed by the rebels. In 2 short campaigns, U.S. troops and military and militia quickly crushed the rebellion. The New Mexicans, seeking better representation, regrouped and fought 3 more engagements, but after being defeated, they abandoned their open warfare against the U.S. American officials ordered the execution of some of the rebel captives in a drumhead court-martial, including rebel leader Pablo Montoya, and other key individuals were charged. An Anglo jury found 15 men guilty of murder and treason and sentenced them to death. 27 people were executed in New Mexico between 1913 and 1960, when the death penalty was removed, except for the murder of a police officer, and there was one since 1976. The death sentences of 5 convicts were commuted by Governor Tony Anaya in 1986, when the death penalty was briefly reinstated and remained until March 2009, when Governor Bill Richardson signed a bill abolishing capital punishment in the state by law. There were still 2 inmates, Timothy Allen and Robert Fry, on death row because of prior convictions, but their death sentences were also thrown out by the New Mexico Supreme Court upon appeal. Been many escapes from New Mexico Department of Corrections over the years. July 4th, 1987 wasn't just a regular prison break. It was another system failure that showed after the 1980s riot, New Mexico Department of Corrections still had major problems. 7 convicts shot a guard and broke out of the maximum security facility, and these individuals were responsible for 7 murders, and 4 of them had made previous escapes. The group included a 4-time killer whose death sentence was later commuted, and all of them were considered very dangerous, which is why they were housed in a special section of the maximum security penitentiary of New Mexico's North Unit. They slipped out of what was considered to be the state's most secure prison in less than 2 minutes, with no gun ever being found, and for days the state was paralyzed and the general public was terrified. In the year 2016, authorities searched for another convicted murderer and violent inmate who escaped while being transported to a New Mexico prison. Joseph Cruz and Lionel Claw were in a transport van in Artesia, New Mexico. They were both shackled, wearing white prison jumpsuits before they fled. I understand they're being taken from the Santa Fe pen to another state facility, and they were considered to be armed and dangerous. And again, the public was totally terrified of more dangerous prisoners on the loose. Evidently, it was discovered later that they had picked their locks on their handcuffs using a hard wire as a cuff key, and it was unclear how they could have slipped away without the 2 prison guards in the van noticing. Both men were eventually apprehended and taken back into custody. I learned a lot about the New Mexico riot and New Mexico street and prison gangs that were involved during that incident as well as during the years after, from guys like Danny Lucero, Pablo Martinez, Dwayne Santisteban, Paco Marcell, and others. You know who you are, and I really appreciate that. Somebody contested in my New Mexico Street Gangs video that Española had any norteño presence, and stated that 18th Street Tiny Wino locals and Santa Cruz locals run that city. I don't know. I barely passed through there years ago, but I do know that a lot of people will hype their clicas and downplay others. Grants, New Mexico is said to have Barrio Southside locals, Brewtown Spider locals, Westside 18th Street, Tiny Wino locals, Click, Pinon Street locals, Barrio 14, Northside locals, 7th Street locals, Eastside Crips, Manaki Pueblo Crips, and some other clicas. In 2014, California Sureños were certified as a security threat group prison gang based on their rising violence and organized criminal activity. I think I forgot to mention, there is a small Barrio Azteca presence in New Mexico, in Burque, and in Las Cruces. The BAs have a much larger presence in the El Paso, Texas area, and even more so in Ciudad Juarez, Mexico. The Bandidos and Mongols still have a presence in the state, but one viewer stated that the HAs are a factor in Madrid and in the East Mountains area. I don't know. I've never seen an HA patch member from New Mexico. I do know the Bandidos and Water Dogs got into it at Red River not too long ago. Maybe somebody who knows the biker scene in New Mexico can clarify or refute the red and white HA claim. There is an Aryan Brotherhood of New Mexico. In 2021, 3 members of the New Mexico Aryan Brotherhood were found to be shot in a very bizarre incident. With a bare chest covered in tattoos and blood running all down his arm, A New Mexico AB named Richard Schuyler Kuykendall rushed to a security guard outside an Albuquerque hospital, then pointing to a dark-colored sedan riddled with bullet holes. He said that there were 3 men inside. After pacing for a few seconds near the hospital entrance, Kuykendall fled the scene, and indeed, inside the car, authorities found 3 dead men. While I do not know exactly what led up to the shooting, it is well known that Aryan Brotherhood members are required to follow all orders of high-ranking members. In particular, they are required, when ordered, to kill without hesitation. Kuykendall was looking at up to 10 years for that case, but took a plea deal for just 18 months for being a felon in possession of a gun. In February 2025, another New Mexico AB named Benjamin Raymond was killed. When police arrived at a home, they found Raymond in the driveway, and he was combative with officers when they notified him that he was under arrest. Raymond tried to flee the scene, and officers were able to tackle him. They fought him for about 2 minutes and state they feared for their lives when they noticed that he was armed with a handgun. Their reports state that as the struggle continued, when Albuquerque PD officers shot and killed him. Approximately 14 years earlier, it was found that Raymond had been sentenced to 150 months in the Federal Bureau of Prisons for committing violent crimes in the aid of racketeering, specifically conspiracy to commit murder and attempted murder. In 2021, Los Carnales was downgraded to a disruptive group due to general lack of gang violence and membership. SNM members have murdered at least 4 New Mexico police officers over the years and had alliances at one time with some other prison gangs, but eventually they burned bridges with most of them. A couple of viewers stated that I forgot to mention that El Jefe, Juan Baca, who was the number 1 SNM, died some years ago from cancer and became a born-again Christian believer later in life. Some factors in the year 2013 led S&M members to be afforded increased privileges in programming in consideration of future decertification, which I understand to mean they get more programs and privileges if they continue to reduce their violence. But in March of 2014, these privileges and increased programming were halted due to an S&M sanctioned homicide at the Southern New Mexico Correctional Facility. In 2015, the feds placed a RICO case on the Sindicato Nuevo Mexico. Over the course of this 3-year investigation, 116 members and associates were arrested, 90% of them being hit with federal crimes, and 70% of the defendants were on the streets when arrested. The majority eventually pled guilty or were convicted during trial. A federal jury in Las Cruces convicted 3 S&M members on charges of murder and conspiracy in aid of racketeering. These were leader Anthony Ray Baca and members Daniel Sanchez and Carlos Herrera, who were found guilty in the stabbing death of 34-year-old Javier Molina, a purported S&M member who was found to be in bad standings. A 4th S&M member, Rudy Perez, was found not guilty in Molina's death. Baca was also found guilty on 2 counts of conspiracy to murder in a failed plot to kill 2 high-ranking state prison officials, including former Corrections Department Secretary Greg Marcantell and my friend and New Mexico prison gang expert and security threat group chief, Dwayne Santisteban. I did a video interview with Dwayne if you want to check that out. During this RICO case, more than 30 members ended up cooperating with law enforcement to help break the decades-old grip of the murderous prison gang. The Burque 505, or Burque Boys, also known as Burqueños, are currently the largest disruptive group in New Mexico Department of Corrections, with 191 members being incarcerated and approximately 460 being paroled or discharged. As I mentioned in my previous videos, they are comprised of individuals from the greater Albuquerque area. They are most active in New Mexico DOC general population, and like the Fresno Bulldogs, they have no identified hierarchy established at this time, although some individuals may carry more weight, often based on seniority. Los Padillas, Westside Locos, and 18th Street appear to be the main controlling force within this group, and they continue to engage in many types of gang activity within the prison system and out on the streets. Not many people know about the Down South Boys, but it is the latest disruptor group certified by New Mexico DOC. These members are local gang members from New Mexico's southeast quadrant, from cities and towns like Portales, Artesia, Hobbs, Crazy Town, Roswell, Carlsbad, and Clovis. They will utilize tattoos of down south or use the Interstate 10 road sign. There is no ethnic or racial boundaries to this group, just geographical. There are still some Native American gangs in the state who often will run Crip or Blood. There's also the Easy Street crew in Burque, who are a trap rap music group, but some people consider them to be a gang. Currently, boxing continues to be the most sought after drug and has the highest rate of introduction into New Mexico Department of Corrections facilities. This is a drug often used to treat opiate addiction. Yes, similar to methadone in the past, which I found was often legally dosed to prison and jail inmates all across the country. An 8 milligram strip of the drug sells anywhere from between $300 to $1,200, depending on supply and demand. Sometimes it is smuggled in via the mail or by visitors, and sometimes it and other contraband are brought in by corrupt staff members. Heroin is also still found within New Mexico DOC, but not as much as in years prior. Marijuana, cocaine, spice or K2, and meth introduction and confiscations is currently reported to be sporadic. In my last New Mexico prison gangs video, I was heavily criticized by one former employee that I understand was very much involved in the early days of the security threat group validation process in that state, who basically seemed to conclude that I was taking all of the glory for relaying my info on New Mexico prison gangs. Quite frankly, I never heard of that individual before. But I can assure you that I always try to give credit where credit is due, and this is reflected in the acknowledgement sections of all of my books and at the end of any of my PowerPoint presentations to any staff across the United States. These units were later named the Security Threat Intel Unit, and their hard efforts eventually led to much of the evidence used as the basis of RICO acts on the Texas Aryan Circle, New Mexico Aryan Brotherhood, and Sindicato Nuevo Mexico within that state. Like I said, I'm pretty familiar with the New Mexico system, having talked to multiple corrections officials, gang intel officers, and people like my mentor, Frank Paco Marcell, who was actually the individual who instituted that program. Paco set up a very similar program in Arizona, but since he was viewed as an outsider in a state where who you know is very important, he was initially met with distrust. Nevertheless, he was able to build confidence with staff and was able to implement a gang validation process and positively affect policy within the agency. Once the gangs started realizing that this new security threat intel unit was monitoring them and that some of them were placed in segregation based on their behavior, they became very angry and started making threats. And confidential information showed that Marcell was a main target by the prison gangs. You can read more about all of this in his book, Unmasking a New Era of Crime, Today's Career Criminals and Cartels. In spite of some of the negative things still going on within New Mexico DOC, there are some positive programs to help the incarcerated, formerly imprisoned offenders better succeed in society. One of the biggest factors is education and being able to think critically, as well as having life skills. And so that's all I have on the New Mexico Department of Corrections. I hope you enjoyed this video and continue to watch more as we cover United States prisons all across the United States in this series. For now, this is Gabe Morales signing off for Gangsters, Cops, and Politicians.